Hi, I'm Katie Williams. I'm the Technical Manager at Dengie Horses, and today I'm here at Writtle University College in Essex, where we've been working together on a project looking at the use of straw as a forage source for horses. I'm delighted to introduce Nadine Mostert, who is the final year student here that's been running the project for us. So Nadine, aside from getting to work with the lovely horses like Lily and Moomin, who we've just seen, what attracted you to running this project for us?
So I was really attracted about the novelty of the research project, and especially because there's only 2 research studies that have kind of looked at the use of straws for a substitute to manage equine obesity. And the thing that I found in these studies is that there is a lot of disparity between the findings, and they also made a lot of assumptions about chewing, even though they didn't measure it. And so I was really interested in growing the knowledge within this area, especially since obesity is a rising concern in the industry.
Absolutely. So Nadine, we spent quite a lot of time working out what we wanted to do, set out the research procedures and protocols and things. But can you just outline, and sort of as a summary, what the idea of the project was and what you then did?
So I decided to do a crossover study design, where that lasted for a 2-week period. And I recruited a total of 8 horses. All of them were subjected to 2 study diets. This was the 100% haylage diet, and the other one was a 50% oat straw, 50% haylage diet. And I measured the chewing rate, consumption rate, number of bowel movements, and body weight and compared it between the 2 study diets. And the horses that I recruited all consisted of different body weights, different ages, breeds, and heights, so that I could determine when I added the oat straw to the haylage diet, if that would influence different horses with different characteristics.
Yeah, and we added oat straw, or used oat straw, because it's the straw type that we most commonly feed in the UK. So what was your thinking behind mixing it 50-50 with the haylage?
So predominantly it was based on the studies that have been published, as those 2 that I mentioned at the beginning. One did 50% straw with 50% hay, and the other one did it with haylage as well. So I based it off of those 2 studies.
Yeah, so we're looking to see if we can replicate similar findings.
Yeah. So I found that the body weight decreased for both on both study diets, but that it was significantly greater for the oat straw diet. In terms of the chewing rate, I found that on the oat straw diet, the chewing rate was lower on day 1, and then on day 7, it was higher than the 100% haylage diet. For the consumption rate on the oat straw diet, it was lower for both day 1 and day 7, but this decrease was statistically significant on day 7. And then for the number of bowel movements, it was higher on the oat straw on day 1, and then on day 7, it was lower than on the oat straw diet compared to the haylage diet.
And I've had the opportunity to have a look at your findings, and what I found really interesting was that there isn't necessarily a correlation between chew rate and consumption rate, which we all tend to talk about giving horses more chew time, and that's not necessarily what we want, because actually if they're chewing more, they can actually consume feed quicker. So was that a surprise to you, and sort of what would be your sort of message to take away from that finding?
I think that was definitely a surprising finding for me, especially because I found a weak positive correlation on the haylage diet, but a weak negative on the oat straw diet. And for me, as a takeaway, there are more feeding behaviors that kind of go into that, such as bite rate, that might influence it a little bit more than just the chewing rate and the consumption rate. And I think that those are areas that need to be investigated further.
Definitely, and it's always a sign of a good research project that you end up asking more questions than you answer. But we were in front of Lily, who was one of the trial horses. Did you find the horses were consistent, or was there a lot of variation between them?
I found, so when I was collecting the data, I found that some of the horses had some of the horses had a higher chewing rate consistently, or just a constant chewing rate regardless of the forage that was being fed. That was quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's something as horse owners we'd want to take away from this, that our horses are very much individuals, and we can do all these research studies and trials, and we have to apply it to our own animals.
Brilliant. That means there might be like a genetic influence, for example, in chewing rate, because if I apply it to people, for example, if let's take me and you eat the same burger, I might chew it 20 times and you might swallow after just chewing it 3 times. So and that might be constant with a lot of food that you eat. And so that might be an inherent factor, which could be the case for horses as well.
Yeah, really fascinating work. Well done. So at this point, I'd like to introduce Bryony Witherow, who was Nadine's supervisor for this project. And Bryony, I wanted to ask you, as an experienced sort of research supervisor, were there any results or findings that particularly surprised you from this study?
I think one of the most interesting findings, which I suppose maybe we should have expected, but I wasn't expecting, was to actually see within some individuals how consistent they were, even between different forage types, which I think was really interesting. But I suppose, like most research, it raises more questions than perhaps answers. But that's definitely an avenue that I think would be really interesting to explore further.
So one of the reasons we wanted to explore the use of straw is previous work that's been done to show that it significantly slows the rate of intake and the impact that has on glycemic and sort of insulinemic responses.
Definitely. So the whole idea behind straw isn't just simply because it's lower in calories potentially, but the actual nutritional characteristics of it, and hopefully the speed of intake might mean that actually some of those spikes that we might ordinarily see, particularly in insulin dysregulated horses, might be moderated slightly by not only the product that we're feeding, but also the speed of the intake. So we're not only looking at it from can we occupy them and satisfy their need to chew, but actually are there physiological benefits, particularly for those horses that we know, those good doers, those that may be a little bit overweight or potentially with metabolic issues. Are there additional benefits that we might see from that?
Definitely, and I know that's an area that you're particularly interested in, Nadine, which is the psychology of chewing and that need to chew.
The psychology of chewing was a very interesting topic for me to kind of dive into, both on analysing my kind of findings, but also as a kind of proposal for future research, because the feeding of straw might actually increase the sorting behavior or the searching behavior because it's so novel and less digestible. So it might have benefits that extend beyond kind of affecting feeding behavior or body weight or number of bowel movements. It might actually kind of just preoccupy them for longer, which is still going to have a beneficial effect. So although I did not measure this, my study highlighted that bite rate is a potential factor that needs to be investigated in future research. And this is because the high indigestible content of oat straw prolongs the time spent chewing, and then also the number of bites that can be taken within the time frame that I measured. And so this might explain why I found a higher chewing rate on day 7, but that this did not correlate with the higher consumption rate on day 7 as well. So I think this is an area for future research.
And I think I think if we'd obviously really sat down and thought about it, that's quite an obvious thing that we know when we observe our horses eating that they might do. But actually to kind of put some numbers on that and actually to have it kind of as data is quite interesting. And I think in terms of further research, that is really going to come into play. I think we've really focused on the kind of physical characteristics and what's different between, haylage and straw, and why a horse might then need to chew more, for example, or the nutritional specification. But actually, we didn't focus as much on perhaps the palatability and other things that would really impact that consumption rate and number of chews that they're actually undertaking. So yeah, that was a really interesting finding that I think could be explored further.
So Nadine, is there one sort of key take-home message you'd like to sort of finish off with?
Yeah, so although this was a short-term study, the most interesting finding for me was the fact that there was a statistically significant decrease in consumption rate after just a week of feeding a 50% oat straw diet. And so although a long-term study would be needed to ascertain if this decrease persists for a longer period of time, this result, along with the results of the other variables I measured, suggest that oat straw could be a potential beneficial substitute for managing obese horses.
Brilliant, well done. Thank you very much. So Dengie are the official fibre feed suppliers to Writtle University College, and I'm here with Jamie Finch, who is Head of Department for Equine. Jamie, can you just explain how important these collaborations are to students and everyone here at Writtle?
Absolutely. We place a lot of value on the opportunities that students have to work within the graduate workforce. So for us, these kinds of projects like Nadine's project here and some of the consultancy work we've done give the students the opportunity to work a bit autonomously on an industry-based issue and develop that and work alongside the company in collaboration to bring something out for industry that's really helpful. It's not an opportunity that is a given. Students work really hard to be part of that, but it's really important for us to develop graduates that are ready to hit the ground running when they get out into the industry, and developing these professional practice skill sets while studying is an absolutely great opportunity for them to do so.
And we've really enjoyed working with you on the project, so thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you to you guys too.